Welcome to this Abundant Insight. I'm Carl Meyer, your host, and today I'm going to be talking with Sheryl Lyons of Culture Spark. And Sheryl has got an interesting case study for us today. So welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you, Carl.
Very good. We've got a basic program of walking through a case study. We want to understand how you got connected with the situation, what were some of the challenges, and then how did it work out? What were tools you employed? What was the successes, the maybe not so smooth parts, and where did it all end up? So that's the basic idea of where we want to go today. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got connected to this opportunity?
Sure. This case study was a client referral. One client had a good experience and recommended me to a peer, a friend of his. Yeah.
Those are the best kind, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. So when you were introduced to the I guess, client, what was the prospect at the time? What was the problem? What was the issue that they brought? Why did they need help?
Well, certainly the emotion that we were dealing with was the frustration of the business owner. Somebody who was typically very good at sales, had been very successful building up his company through fast sales. And the team was having a hard time keeping up and being able to deliver quality work in a timely manner. And this backlog of sales was sort of piling up at the owner's feet. And he wasn't willing to release it and let it go because the infrastructure and the people systems were not in place and just did not have that trust to release all these new sales. So it was a good problem to have, but very, very frustrating for this owner.
Yeah, that's certainly a good problem. I've seen kind of worse problems, if you will, but it's still a problem. And I've also seen that could bring companies down if they don't address it. So at first, what was the, initial conversation? Was, there any, particular direction they had in mind? Were they just frustrated and didn't know where to go? What did that look like?
So there were a lot of moving parts. The wife of the owner had just joined the firm to help out. And so that role was not defined. There were an awful lot of initiatives that the owner was playing around with in his mind and had several different projects started. He was being pulled back into the day-to-day of the business, which was, he had built it, but it just wasn't his preference. And so what I had to do is first of all kind of lay everything out on the table and ask the question, where do you want this to go and where is this headed? What does this look like at the end? And then help this owner be able to sequence the different initiatives in the right way, in the right order, to be able to sort of turn the levers of infrastructure and operations up while simultaneously releasing some of that pressure so that he could use some of his capacity to focus on the sales, which was his love and his desire. So it was about coordinating and sequencing those different initiatives so that they could complement one another rather than compete for time and attention and understanding with his team. So we laid out that plan and put everything in the right order. And one of those first things was figuring out how to augment and to grow his staff.
Right. Okay. Sounds like a good triage kind of let's define the problem and make an initial plan to go forward. So, and like you say, it does sound like there was a lot of moving parts there.
That's right. And which I find to be very typical for many entrepreneurs. That's the entrepreneurial experience, right? Is to have all these great ideas, but it's how we get them executed through our teams, how we bring our teams along with us so that they understand. For them, I mean, if this was a small group, it was all just change for the sake of change. So by being able to put the right communication around it and help people understand why A was coming before B was coming before C, and what that end result was like, it helps to bind the entire company together in those initiatives, and follow along the way any good leader would want for his people to follow in the direction that he leads.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, the communication is critical. How you frame a change can massively impact the adoption rate. So, absolutely, I can see that would be a big deal. So, are there particular, tools that you use? You just kind of have, we write a plan, we've got a kind of to-do list, break that down, or the things like that you're using?
Well, sure. I have in my business in Culture Spark, I've developed several different thought exercises for leaders to help them come to clarity with their vision. And it was going through that exercise that we realized there was just way too much at one time on his plate. It was manifesting in his team meetings as frustration. And so he was passing along that frustration to his people, which made everybody on edge, right? The team just wants to please and to do what they're being asked to do. And so it was kind of this effect that went across the whole company. And so going through that vision exercise helped us realize that one of the first activities we needed to do was go through an ideal client discussion. You can't serve everybody. At some point, every business grows to the point where they just take any sale they possibly can, and then they realize, well, some of these are profitable, some of these are not. Some of these are way more work than they need to be, whatever the case may be. And so that was one of the first things that we sequenced was putting together these different projects, going through a client culling, and then what are we going to do after that? And how are we going to set up our pricing relative to who we're identifying as our ideal client? And the Abundance software was incredibly helpful in this, just in helping to identify and capture all of these different ideas, projects, and initiatives, and tie timelines to them, which was really very helpful because everybody just says, oh, we can do that next quarter, we can do that next year. But when you actually put it down in a timeline, you get to see what's realistic. And so we were setting realistic timelines. We were going through some of these activities that were long overdue and just painful, right? I mean, if you've got a list of 600 clients and you're going to go through them one by one, it was a painful exercise for that owner. But, in about an hour and a half, we got through it, and he survived and came out of it with great clarity of who do we serve, why do we serve this population, and how that helps the team scale their process and open up more capacity for more sales.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. If you can, like you say, call out the non-core clients and, focus on the processes for the ones you really do want to serve, man, you can be so much more efficient. Profitability probably improved significantly. Was that something you saw?
Absolutely. And it helped him, it helped us compartmentalize and identify basically 3 different types of client, and therefore 3 different pricing structures. So that clarity brought simplicity, so that when he is able to turn that lever with sales, they're going to be able to come in much more quickly because now there's a framework and a structure to put them through that didn't exist before, right? Mm-hmm. The pricing was still kind of, how's the wind blowing today? And so that structure created some security, not only for the employees, but for the owner as well.
There you go. Made life a little bit easier, reduced the stress. I'd imagine that pretty quickly there was kind of a visible reduction in the stress level. Did you see that?
I did. And I told the owner just as much. Within just a few weeks of going through these items, his level of frustration was notably diminished. And part of that came from my coaching as well, and helping him see, I know you don't intend this way, but here's how you're showing up in those meetings, and here's what you need to do differently. It's about repeating the same message. It's about repeating that message over and over again with clarity and conviction. And once he started doing that, he was carrying himself, much more strongly, much more commanding, and approachable to his team. So that was a marked difference, and one that I was really happy to see.
That's fantastic. It sounds like some great results. Sometimes when you do have changes like that, there are changes, some people, get on board, take it well. Other people either initially resist or maybe are just not a fit. Was there any situations like that?
Absolutely. Whenever there's change in an organization, it is an opportunity for choice for every person in the organization. And with a lot of this change happening, there was one individual that was showing some resistance. The company is growing. There's this new leader that's going to be hired. Why is that not my position? And had honestly been had been sticking out like a sore thumb for some time. And again, just because of the discomfort that this leader had with their leadership capabilities, it was an awkward and a conversation. It was a conversation that had been put off for some time. But by going through and sort of creating this communication with the direction of the company, within about 6 weeks, she found another job she's very happy with. She helped transition everything really well, and it was a win-win for everybody involved. So I think there's always going to be some level of resistance. You've got to find those people who are going to be champions for you and help bring others along. But it's still going to be everyone's choice ultimately, whether they follow along or if they choose to change their circumstances.
So in the end, did anyone choose to, leave the company based on that?
Yes, this one individual who had basically been showing this resistance opted to leave on her own. Okay. But she was going to be removed at some point anyway. So again, I think it worked out as best as it could, and the company is now stronger for it. They've made some hires, replaced that competency, and are, like I said, stronger for it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Were there a particular, sounds like this is not an uncommon situation. Was there a particular lesson that you felt like, you picked up on in this particular situation that, really jumped out at you?
That's a good question. I mean, I always see things from that cultural lens, right? And so for me, it's a reminder of this quintessential entrepreneurial experience that, great salespeople and people with great ideas can all make great companies, but it's in their capabilities as a leader that's going to serve them in the long run, in the long haul. And so, being able, from my perspective, to be able to coach along leadership behaviors and leadership disciplines. People don't like the word discipline, so we can put in the word routines, right? And again, that's what the abundant software does, is provide some accountability, some structure, some routine that allows people to have that kind of security and trust in the system. And it helps a leader be able to bring his team along and align the company's vision with the people who are going to be required to execute it.
Absolutely. Yes. I've seen so many times when that vision is not, really everybody's not on the same page. You've got people going in all different directions, and wow, that can be a very frustrating experience for everybody involved. So Yes, that's a really good point. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And that's where I come in from that perspective of culture. Culture is aligning your strategy with the people that are going to be executing on it. And it's a combination of art and science, of soft skills, but then also having the right tools and the right framework to build on that success.
Well, that's a really good description. And that description makes it feel so much different than the kind of wishy-washy, undefined feeling that I think so many entrepreneurs think of when they think of culture. And, in my experience, it is much more a defined, we can make it, like say there's an art to it, but it's still very much a process around it as well.
I always say that the formula is the same, but the execution is different every time, depending on the company, depending on that owner, and the direction and what they're wanting to get out of their business. So you're right. It is. It's a combination of the soft skills and having the right tools and structures in place to move that along.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, great. This has been very informative for me. It gives me a real perspective on your practice as well as on this particular client. Appreciate you sharing that with us. Is there any last thoughts we should put in before we wrap up?
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the chance to spotlight one of my clients and show how the Abundance software can be a valuable tool in a consultant's tool bag. I'm grateful to be partnering with you, Carl. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sheryl. Welcome to the Abundant Insight.